The soccer stadium replaces the Paw Sox. We hope.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
Greetings, friends. Nice to have you aboard. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're going to tackle a single issue here this evening, which has been kind of our trend because, well, there's a lot to talk about on the subjects that we pick from a week-in, week-out basis. Obviously, we've got congressional hearings that have dominated the national news. We record this show on Thursdays at today it's 1:20 in the afternoon. You're seeing it on Friday on Fox and Sunday on Channel 12. So there's a lot of stuff that is developed, obviously, from the January 6th Select Committee hearing. We may be able to tackle that on this forum next week, but of course, weekdays 3 to 6 on WPRO. Tonight, we're going to discuss the soccer stadium, the Tidewater Landing project in Pawtucket, which, you know, I am completely bullish on, but I will tell you, this is a difficult cat to skin. Awful analogy, sorry. And the good mayor of Pawtucket, who I am also bullish on and who I have an affinity for, not only because he's a good guy and a good public servant, but who really gave it his all when it came to the Paw Sox, is here tonight to kind of talk to us about that and a couple other Pawtucket issues. Two logistics issues. A, I sat on my glasses, so if they go like that, hang in there. And the mayor, whenever I put him in a humid room, he gets a little brow soaked. So he's fine, I'm fine, and we're going to get going here. Here's a headline that will start the conversation. Pawtucket Soccer Stadium backers seek $30 million more from Rhode Island. What? Here's kind of the scene setter that was first broadcast by Target 12 and Tim White last week after a conference call, a Zoom discussion.
This is a critical moment for the Tidewater Landing project as costs have skyrocketed. Both the city of Pawtucket and the developer are asking the state for an extra $30 million to get it off the ground. Inflation and supply chain issues have dramatically increased the cost of Tidewater Landing, a development plan that includes a professional soccer stadium, 435 housing units, and a parking garage. Now the city of Pawtucket and the developer are seeking an additional $30 million from the state, potentially bringing the state's share from $27 to $57 million.
I'm such an optimist, I haven't even begun to contemplate that.
Brett Johnson of developer Fortuitous Partners says there is currently no alternative plan if the state says no.
I would be doing a disservice if I started thinking about a plan B. We're all in on plan A.
Pawtucket Mayor Don Grebien says the city already has about $20 million of skin in the game and is hopeful the state will pitch in more.
The dollars are there, so there's no reason they should say no, but if they do, we're going to have to digest that and figure out where we are.
On Monday, Grebien and the developer met behind closed doors with the Rhode Island Commerce Corporation, which holds the purse strings on the request. The board is chaired by Governor Dan McKee.
We're looking for a solution of some sort, and yet at the same point in time, we have to do right by the people we serve, right? The taxpayers need to be in the mix.
A spokesperson for the governor tells me the board made no decisions today, adding several Commerce Corporation members expressed that if we are to proceed with the project, they are looking for non-state revenues to join in closing the $30 million financial gap. With the Target 12 investigators, Tim White, 12 News.
So that means the gap is $30 million. Welcome, my friend. It's great to see you. The $30 million gap is the gap. The gap now, though, is like who's going to fund it, and we're going to talk about that likely in our second segment. Let's remind ourselves, though, first, because I think it's important to talk about where we've been and how we got here. I know you start to twitch and need therapy, and you know I might come along with you when it comes to the loss of the Paw Sox. Yep. Aftermath now. Mood of the city, has it been supplanted by a new exciting project? Is there still a lot of, you know, amongst the citizenry and government officials, mourning process still going on?
So yeah, I mean, the loss of the Paw Sox and with them opening up in Worcester, you know, and God bless them, there's still that, hey, we lost this, how did we lose this? This was one of our many tributes, if you will. It's like the Slater Mill when we compare it. So, but people have mourned it. I think people get through that. We have a much more diverse community. So soccer was always on the uprise, and you heard that even during the Paw Sox. Baseball versus soccer, and soccer being on the incline. Having said all of that, you think about, we went through that, right? It was wrong for the city, wrong for the state, but we lost them. And it was because of, at the time, right, there was a leadership issue, it was lack of leadership and lack of buy-in, but we went through a process. And through that process, after we lost it, we ended up getting that TIF tool, which is the tax incremental financing tool that we talk about a lot, and I don't want to bore everybody with it, but what it did is quickly a zone that was created within Pawtucket that we could allow revenue that comes from that zone, that district, back into the development. So state dollars from income tax to the meals and beverage to the if the business entities, anything new in that district. And that money would now be put back into this development. So this development, any development I should say, right? So that TIF tool was created. So now they're challenging the TIF tool. There's some fear because it's the first time we're using the TIF tool.
Okay, well, you're a little ahead. So that instrument of the TIF tool was also in place in part in the Paw Sox deal.
Correct. It came out at the very end.
It came out at the very end, and we'll talk about that in terms of logistics in a second. But I just wanted to make a transition from the Paw Sox deal to the soccer deal. I mean, this soccer deal was announced in grand form. You know, Gina Raimondo was able to come in and kind of say, hey, guess what? We're able to do this, and this is going to be bigger and better than ever versus what we lost. Let's remind ourselves of a couple of things. One, and I will never move away from this opinion that state government fell down on the Paw Sox.
And
correct?
Absolutely. And fell down on its responsibility to the city of Pawtucket as well.
Yeah, you were inclined to stay above the fray and as sportsmanlike as you possibly could through the whole thing, even after the whole thing collapsed, because you were hoping that whatever the next deal came down, that you could, you know,
leverage or value.
Leverage
Absolutely.
the
Fair.
loss.
Agreed.
Okay, so listen, then Speaker Mattiello, the governor, you know, their own problems with each other, the governor's feigned diligence, all of those things, I think allowed this thing to kind of slip through the cracks, meaning the Paw Sox. So this Fortuitous group that we saw in that package comes in and makes this proposal, sees fertile ground for the sport of soccer. They're not just soccer team and soccer stadium builders, they are big picture builders, as you see in the picture. And there's a grand announcement. And what I think discourages people is that we have these grand announcements, and most people think, okay, a grand announcement means it's going to get done.
Right.
Explain for me what is, without specifics, which we'll get into in the next segment, how do these things break down?
So, I mean, first, this is a unique case where it's inflation, right, the COVID, so that was new to everybody, legitimately. Like that, not new, I shouldn't say, but a COVID, pandemic, inflationary costs we haven't seen since the 80s. They really played a factor. But now, put that aside. We have agreements. If it were not for those factors, we wouldn't be asking the state, working with the developer who's put more in. We had a deal that was baked. They started groundwork, they've started development. What happens is we get the original number, the new numbers that come out, they actually go out to bid with their contractor, and it is, honestly, it was probably 70 million more than what it was. So since February, we've been meeting with Commerce RI, the city, Commerce RI and developer, doing value engineering, bringing that number down, and we got it down to where we can still salvage a great product for the city. All one, when I say that, all the factors that come into it, it's a gateway project for Rhode Island, a gateway project coming into Pawtucket, and we were able to get that down to 30 million. So now we're talking over 30 million. But there are so many meetings, there are so many personalities, there are so many individual thought processes that come into it, and sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle. But at the end of the day, this is what's great for Pawtucket, and we've narrowed it down to this 30 million.
Okay, when we come back, we'll talk about what the numbers are specifically now and the kind of strategery that this mayor is employing to get this deal done. Stay with us. Right, so we're continuing to talk about this $30 million gap. Here's an interesting piece that Channel 12 did this week where the mayor is kind of biting down a little bit. Watch.
Tidewater Landing project is more than just a soccer stadium, says Pawtucket Mayor Don Grebien. The development alongside the Seekonk River would include a 10,000-seat soccer stadium, 435 housing units, retail space, and a parking garage. But the price for Phase 1 has increased from $284 million to $344 million.
There's a $30 million gap that was caused by inflationary costs and the supply chain.
Developer Fortuitous Partners and the city have called on the state to fill that gap. That call has now turned urgent, as Grebien suggests the developer is growing impatient.
You know, at some point, they feel insulted, and I think we're getting close to that.
A closed-door meeting took place on Monday for hours between the developer, city, and Rhode Island Commerce, but the state hasn't committed.
Because we're afraid and we're really concerned that we could lose this developer, right? And we've been down this pathway before, and none of us wants that.
Down this path with the Pawsox, Grebien says the state needs to start putting Pawtucket first.
This would be the second time that the state has not stepped in for Pawtucket. So what does that say to the outside world about investing here in Rhode Island and here in Pawtucket? And the state just always puts so much money into, you know, the capital city. It's now time to take care of the Blackstone Valley.
All right, so I got to, listen, I give you credit, and you know I'm with you 100%, but not every deal is the same, and not every structure is got the same kind of you know, difficulties. Look, I think you're very wise to play on the sentiment here, and well, you deserve to. But also the city has got some obligations here to take a look at the diligence. First of all, you took on Apex, the Apex building, which was originally part of the complex of this project and then became extracted. But you and Apex still are in an eminent domain deal. You had, I mean, you were in a litigation.
Yeah,
at that point, you were a long litigation. There's a 2-year time period, COVID included, supply chain issues included, which I think exacerbated this extension of this expense hyperbole. And being tied in and having this TIF element that was in the legislation that had Apex litigating with you kind of gunked it up a little bit.
Fair, absolutely.
All right, and so the city of Pawtucket probably could have asked the legislature to make that a little bit cleaner. The details of that, folks, I'd be here until next week at midnight. But Pawtucket's got some obligation here. Here's the problem that I see, and that is that Commerce is being asked to act independently to grow the TIF.
Yep.
And the TIF is this region around the stadium where there's an incremental tax that will be attributed back to the project to help to fund the stadium. And the Pawtucket Redevelopment Authority will borrow money to make it real in order to be paid back by the TIF. And now what you're asking is a bigger TIF, meaning a larger incremental portion of taxes to be flooding in for that. Commerce has the authority to do that.
Correct.
But if Commerce does that, it sticks the legislature down the line with a responsibility to, in its budget, find the money that won't be going to the state and will be going to the TIF. Ironically, the politics of this is the General Assembly leadership don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole right now. So the governor is trying to figure out how to make his friend Don Grebien whole, get this project off the ground. By the way, he was very bullish on the Pawsox and maybe
absolutely stood by me. No doubt.
He's got no help from the legislature other than a wink, don't worry, that will take care of it. Commerce doesn't want to step out and put the burden of the
full burden
on the legislature. So I am told that the $30 million ask of Commerce is off the table as we speak and broadcast today. Agreed?
Fair.
And what's happened is that they've come back and said, find the $30 million amongst both the developer and the city. And reportedly, you have stepped up with another $10 million, or have articulated that you will. Is that true?
True. So what it started with quickly, Dan, right, is this is all out of the TIF. It's how we finance it because the city would be foregoing its new revenue as well, which is part of the TIF, just not the state. So quickly, what we've started at is it's $30 million can come out of this TIF. Having said that, though, we have a memorandum of understanding that's signed by Commerce with the city that it's an 80-20 split, 80% being on the state side, 20% being on the city side. So as we started these conversations, we were hearing from the Commerce Board, and it was fair. The city needs to
Is this new this morning as we record? That this memorandum of understanding?
No, this memorandum of understanding is old. It was a year or so older originally.
Oh, you're talking about the original.
The original,
But the
correct.
new $30 million,
sorry.
Commerce doesn't want to step into this.
Right, so
There's
what-
already $27 million in the TIF already.
Right.
22 of which is to build buildings across the river.
Part
$5 million is
1B
to
that
build the
was split.
stadium.
Correct.
Hang in there, guys. There's a lot to. This is a very. If they get anything from this interview, is this is very complicated.
Right.
But the bottom line is as we speak, I don't believe that Commerce is going to add $30 million to the take.
So they quickly raised at the meeting that they wanted to see more skin in the game from the city.
Right.
And then we approached it as is the 80-20, which would be 24-6 if we split that even when we keep the methodology that was already there of the 30. What's come back from Commerce, from the governor's office through Commerce, through our Commerce department, to all the partners, is that what is the most the city can put in? So we go back to all.
Is it 10?
Is it 10? We've agreed that it's 10, that we'll be able to pay for that through
How?
surcharges that come in on tickets, those type of things that we can do from a financial
Meaning you're
of
going
it.
to take responsibility for that kind of money.
Correct.
And you're going to, how are you going to fund that now? Are you going to bond that money and forward it to construction and steel costs, or are you going to backload the bonding? In other words, one of the sticking parts was that Commerce didn't want you to go ahead and borrow money against this formula, because if the project goes south, the state in part could be held accountable for having to pay for an element that didn't bear fruit.
That was the perception and the fear, but the bond holders, once all of the formula, and I'm trying to keep it simple, is done and agreed on, the bond holders have the risk, not us. So when we go out to bonds, right? So it's putting the formula together.
All right, I can accept that. But all the headlines are, right, up until this point, Commerce is on the deliberative hook for a $30 million ask.
Right.
And it doesn't seem like that is going to be
Correctly.
the final bear out.
We put in a joint, just quickly, we put in a joint application to Commerce with us and Fortuitous, amending the original for the $30 million. So that's where it started, yes.
Okay, and so what do you expect to happen with that? Are you going to ask for a new meeting from Commerce and for them to deliberate and make a decision on this?
So Commerce is willing to do some meetings there. Everybody's flushing it out.
What is Fortuitous's partnership in this $30 million? So you're going to put in 10 from the city.
Yep.
10 more. This is 10 more.
Yeah.
Is Fortuitous putting in more capital?
So they put in, I think it's 25. I don't want to lie to you, but I'm pretty sure it's 25 new additional capital, not in the $30 million number.
Right.
That's
before the $30
prior to.
million
Correct.
number.
That's how we got it down to 30.
Right. And
So-
so what portion of the new 30, the dangling 30, the ultimate 30, is Fortuitous, the project manager, putting into this whole thing?
At this point, nothing. So it would be 20 on the state, 10 on the city.
All right. And so the state doing this is whatever happens here. We'll come back. The final chapter of this, I don't know where I am. The final chapter on this, what does the state do to make this thing whole? Stay with us. All right, so the Fortuitous group, as we talk about this soccer stadium deal, the Fortuitous group is saying, Friday's a deadline, meaning by the time you've seen this show, they want to know that this thing is done. Don't cry wolf. Like, you already got $15 million, and maybe you ought to be a little bit more patient than a Friday deadline. So as you're watching this show, guys, I don't know whether this thing was resolved or not, because this show's airing Friday night. But you're crawling closer.
Yeah.
What is your perspective on what the ask is now of the state of Rhode Island to fill a $20 million gap for the Tidewater soccer project?
Is a $20 million gap through the TIF is what it is.
I'll be a monkey's uncle if they're going to do that. Don, I don't believe they're going to do that. I think what's going to happen here is that you're going to be in a position where the administration and the Commerce are going to ask the stadium to be built.
Yeah.
And that the growth of the project will be funded by the General Assembly, at least with some kind of wink, nod, or actual vote of funding to either adjust budgets so that the TIF that you're talking about can work, or some other instrument. Maybe it's refund Rhode Island grants, or the light. I think you're in a situation here where a little bit of leap of faith might have to happen from the developer to build the stadium, and maybe the housing and all that stuff is a year later on its timetable, because I don't think you're going to be made whole.
So that's an option. That is being talked about. You got great ears, right? So that those different options and how they fund it is it, right? But the 20 million up front needs to come from somewhere for us to go out and bond it, the authority. So whether they choose, how they choose to backfill that for 1B, and the only reason we separated this is because of the Apex property, 1A and 1B. It's still the same, so we're talking 344 million.
Understand, folks, what A and B is talking about,
Yes,
plots of land. The stadium is A, the stadium's here.
Yep.
The building is across the river here, that's B. That's all the fun, the bars, the housing,
There's some bars on the other side, but yeah, and the bridge,
the
open
the bridge that
right.
you say you're going to wait on a little bit.
Right.
C was
Public
Apex
access,
across
yeah.
the highway. That's
Fair.
off the table.
Yeah.
Look, I just think that it's a conundrum, because I understand investors and the developer want to know that the deal is whole
Yep.
before they move forward another dime. But they may have to have a little bit of leap of faith that the project is going to have some extension of finality of funding. Does that make sense to you?
And I think everybody is talking about those things, is how do we get the most certainty that we can to make sure it's funded, because we've got to put the cash out.
So it really is to be determined.
Yes, absolutely.
So this thing, we're not sitting here, A, with a resolve, or B, with a guarantee that it will be.
Correct. And that's the challenge.
Well,
right?
I'm pulling for you, you know that. I think this thing
It's
has
right.
it's got to be done in one way, shape, or form. But one would hope that the developer that's already 15 million into this thing will see the big picture.
Yeah, and I think there's a willingness. You know, they've got commitments. It's how do we tie all those commitments up, and how do you push this dollar up, push this
And you
one
want
up.
this job again?
I know. Yes, I do. I am running for. Oh, I can't do that now. So yes, I do.
Oh, did you? Aren't you formally announced?
Yeah, I did, but I didn't want to put you on the spot. I wanted to take any favors. So yes.
All right, we'll follow up on the radio next week. We'll be right back. And maybe next week we'll also get to the baby stroller bill. The Senate passed 30-5 an allocation for 3-year-old babies and strollers to have special parking like disabled people. 30-5. Singly the dumbest piece of legislation I've ever seen passed. And if the House takes it up, there will be a lot of hats eaten. That's all I got to say, and not mine. We'll talk to you next week. Have a great evening. Bye.